All right, we're going to start our grinding process. What's important when you do this is you want to de-weight the machine, meaning take the down pressure weight off of the head of the machine. Remember, we have a lot of glasses sticking up and protruding out of the surface, and it's just really aggressive when it first starts to cut. Once you've smoothed out a section, it actually kind of bulks it out better. So it's just a good idea to just kind of de-weight it. I'm going to be starting the machine on roughly 4.5 speed. Each machine is different. Check with your manufacturer. Let's start the vacuum. Okay. Now, before I just go and do a whole slab, I want to evaluate what's happening on the concrete. So just, because you see some dust, don't assume that it's everything is perfect. So I'm going to do a small test section here, and I want to make sure that I don't see anything out of the ordinary. And all in all, it's looking really good. Couple little pits, but that's just a result of the glass, so we might have to skim coat this. Also, typically what I'm doing is I'm going to run my first pass, let's say north and south, and then on my next pass I'm going to go east and west. And we just don't want to see any rutting or any track marks, and so by switching it up, or you can swing the machine as well, that's just a good indication. You don't want to, I see guys that are learning how to polish make the mistake, they run every single pass in the same direction, and then after, when it's all said and done, you see these pathways, and that really detracts from the final appearance. All right, we've just completed our first pass with our double segment 80 grit metal bond. Just a couple of observations. You really need to be careful. On our little test panel here, you can see we've built it up here and there's an actual ridge or a lip. So you never want to run the machine off the edge. It could obviously chip the edge and throw a diamond off. So we did a pretty good job getting as close as we could, but I just want to point that out. So generally what you would do is you'd come back and you'd hand tool this type of a scenario. So it's time to switch grits. So we're going to now switch, like we talked about, we're going to switch from our 80 grit over to a 150 grit. And while I'm changing out the diamonds, Brian's going to go ahead and vacuum, and we'll see what we get after this first grit. Here we go with our 150 metal bond. Remember, it's a double segment metal. Now, again, it's a little bit difficult. We're working on a very small panel. So what I ultimately want to try to do is not run in the same pass that I just did. So I'm going to run up that way, and then I'm going to go perpendicular to my first pass, just being really careful. It's looking great. I evaluated the floor. I don't see anything out of the ordinary. Very, very minimal, if any, really, divots or pinholes. So we're looking good, so we're going to run our 150s. I did bump the machine speed up 1 notch, by the way. All right, we just completed our 150 metal bond diamond. We're going to go ahead and vacuum it, see what we get. I'm really specifically looking for, a scratch pattern. If we're good to go, we don't have any aggressive scratches, it's time to jump over to our different pad that we showed you earlier, which is a pad that's specifically designed for polishing overlays. And once again, when we make that transition from a metal, we always drop back a grit. So we're going to be running our black pad, which is our 100 grit pad. Brian's going to vacuum it, and we'll evaluate and move on. All right, now we're going to transition into a different style diamond. This is what's referred to as a rigid plate. This is what was holding our 80 grit and our 150 metals. Now we get rid of this plate and we switch over to a Velcro backed plate. Okay, so this simply has Velcro on it, and we attach it over here to the machine. And then we're going to get busy going with our next grit, which is our 150. Remember, we're dropping back a grit now to remove the scratches from the 150. And that's our 100 grit, ready to go. One point I want to bring up, as I was starting this new grit, I felt resistance, meaning the machine wasn't freely just rolling along the surface of the concrete. And the reason for that is, depending on how new or old the diamond is, it's going to wear, and as it wears, it's going to get closer to the surface, or if it's new, it's going to be higher. Point being, this is the dust shroud right here. This is obviously here to contain the dust, but since we switched over diamonds, it's actually dragging across the floor. So it's holding me from advancing the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and make the adjustment so it's not resisting against the floor. All right, let's give that a try. Much better. Now we're switching over to our 200 grit, the blue diamond pad here. A couple of observations. If you noticed on the previous grit, we were getting a lot of resistance, and it was creating quite a bit of dust. Number one, we didn't purge our vacuum is one reason, so we went and purged it, and we should get a lot less dust. Also, what I noticed, I've been grinding with the weight on right here. So if you get a surface where you see it, not that the surface is soft, but where you're creating a lot of dust, you can de-weight it a little bit. Take a weight off, which is fine. And that's what we're going to try here. Another thing that we talked about earlier, our intention is to dye this to show you some coloring techniques. If this panel was not going to receive any color, this is the perfect time in which you'd be applying the colloidal silicate hardener. So remember, we use the black pad, which is a 100 grit. What we would want to do is clean this with an auto scrubber, apply the silicate at this phase, okay? It's really open and porous right now, and then come back with your 200 grit and go up from there. So just as a reminder, this would be a perfect phase to go ahead and apply the hardener. Now, upon evaluation, I really like what I see. I virtually see no scratches. So that's a common mistake I see people that are just getting into the polishing industry. They don't evaluate the floor. So they just go ahead and run a pass and assume that it's okay. You'll see an experienced polisher, as soon as they turn on the machine, they're looking down and they're going like this with their foot, making sure they're not seeing scratches. If you see it scratching, immediately stop the machine. Here we're good to go, so we're going to go on to the next step. Remember, I'm crossing directions each time. Now, when we start getting into, this is what we refer to as the honing phase. We've done grinding. Now we're getting into refinement. Each grit is refining it, and now we're getting into the honing stages. It is important at the completion of one pass to go ahead and de-weight the machine. Sometimes the resistance, the weight of the machine, if you stop it right now with these pads, it can create scratches. So when I terminate this pass, when I'm completed, I'm going to de-weight it a little bit. I'm not going to pick the head up all the way, but I'm just going to take the weight off when I turn the machine off to eliminate scratching. Speed of the machine, up 1 notch. Notice much less dust. The dust that you saw was just a function of the previous grit on the bottom of the machine. Much less dust. De-weighting it, cleaning the filters. Now normally, what I would be doing on a larger machine, or a larger slab I should say, I would be turning the machine backwards. So in other words, this is so small I'm forced to go forward and back. Normally I would not be doing that. I'd turn the machine around. Okay. Something like this, I'll demonstrate.